Talking to myself again, but it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true.
Good evening, welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. It is Sunday and I am back from the Stadium of Light. I've had a shower. Yep, I've had to have a shower because you come back from the Stadium of Light. Team Sayers, second pro fight, second pro win for Mo Sayers today. Second stoppage, can't get any better than that. Roland September for his third fight. Joined tonight by Ben Jacobs and a little surprise for everybody in the chat and regular viewers, the return of Holly Blades. Good evening, both.
Good evening.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Yeah, good to have you back, Holly. And we've always got plenty to talk about tonight on the show. Questions already flying in for Ben. But let's first talk about Newcastle's opening couple of games before we come to the questions. And Ben, Newcastle, friendlies are friendlies. I'm not sure how you feel about it with regards to Leicester City, but they're there to blow the cobwebs out. They're there to try and integrate the new players into the team. But Newcastle can't do any better than they've done. 100% record so far, and 8 goals scored, 1 conceded. What have you made of what you've seen or picked up on social media of those first 2 games?
Yeah, like you say, you can't read too much into the results, particularly, I suppose, the victory against Gateshead. But actually, what I like about a club with ambition is they don't treat a friendly like a friendly. So rather than kind of trying to play lesser opposition and then find that it's not competitive, it's much better, I believe, to do what Liverpool and Manchester United did, even though Liverpool were on the end of a hiding, and play serious opposition. And that's what Newcastle United will do over the coming days and weeks before their opener against Nottingham Forest. So Mainz, Benfica, Atalanta and Athletic Club are really good tests. And 18-16 Munich, by the way, absolutely no pushover either. So I think that that's the most impressive thing for me, that Newcastle United are testing themselves in pre-season rather than just playing pushover opposition, if you like. And they're obviously out there in Austria. Bruno is again on fire. It's been good to see Joe Willock also get on the score sheet too, which I think is really important. And what we're seeing, by all accounts, on the pre-season tour is not just a team winning, but having fun together. And most tellingly for me about the team spirit and ethic was in the pool, playing head tennis and having a laugh. And it's much more relaxed than some of the other clubs that you're seeing. And this is why you go away to bond off the field. And I think that the personalities we saw from Newcastle United on and off the field in the back end of last season were the difference between uniting the dressing room and getting the football club out of trouble. And that's bled into pre-season. And then when you have somebody in pre-season that's scoring goals and that momentum can continue into the new season, it can only benefit. So I don't really care whether a team, Newcastle or anyone else, wins, loses or draws. It's more about how they apply themselves. And I've been very impressed by the energy that Newcastle have brought to pre-season so far. And like I say, I think that it's only going to benefit Newcastle having a series of serious opposition that can test them before Nottingham Forest. Because you always see this in pre-season. The team wins all their games and then does absolutely useless. And a side loses all their games and gets off to a flyer. So I look more for the individual storylines rather than the collective results. And again, comparing Newcastle to potentially another rival next season in Arsenal and Gabriel Jesus, who scored again against Everton. And it's that aspect of an individual who feels that they have a fit in the team and they're starting the season without any rust. And from what I've seen so far, that certainly applies to Bruno. But there's one or two other players, like Almiron, I think, has got a couple of goals. Maybe they both came against Gateshead, and Willock, who I've already mentioned. Those kind of players, a goal, even in pre-season, can do them a world of wonders. So I think Newcastle are in good shape, but it's that dressing room unity and their application towards pre-season, even off the field, and the spirit that we're seeing from the glimpses through social media that Newcastle United share. That's the thing that's really stood out to me so far.
Yeah, Longstaff's played well as well for me. First two games, I mean, the Gateshead game was difficult to judge. We didn't get much footage of that, but took his goal well. And then took his goal well against 1860, as you say, who are they're no easy team to beat. And yeah, for me, it's a positive start. Holly, we've now announced another game, Burnley, which I think will give us a good test as well. It'll be behind closed doors, unfortunately, that one. I think we've all like to have had another trip down to Burnley. It's a friendly club. But what's your views of the pre-season so far, Holly?
Yeah, I think we've done well. Like you mentioned earlier, we didn't get to see a lot of that Gateshead game, but by all accounts, people played well. And I know Sean Longstaff in particular has apparently played well kind of across training and also the fixtures that we have played, which is exciting because I think Sean Longstaff had so much promise and potential coming into the team. Obviously, he got that injury, and from my perspective, he's never been the same player since. So I'd love to see him come back next season and start to build on what he created, I feel like, when he first came into that Newcastle side, because you love to see a local player do well. And I feel like we need to strengthen in that midfield. And if someone like Sean Longstaff steps up, then that should kind of solve that issue, and we can focus more on just getting that key striker in there, which I feel like I'm just so nervous. I really want a striker through the door. But yeah, look, 1-3-0 in the friendly the other night. We're playing again tomorrow, and I'd love to see us get another result. I think going abroad and playing against some, good European opposition can also give us an idea of how we'd fare in Europe, because a lot of fans feel as though we could push for Europe in the next few seasons. I wouldn't expect it next season personally, but I don't see why not in the next maybe 3 seasons. And so far we've done well, and I think with the next few games it'll certainly set us up well for the new season. It's really, really good to see the club having some ambitious opposition, because I know a few years ago, obviously we had non-league opposition, the likes of York, and it probably wasn't a fair test going into the new season.
No, you're right there. Craig Hope's put an interesting piece out in the last few hours, Ben, and ultimately the main headline that comes from it is that Eddie Howe's ready to gamble on the fitness of Callum Wilson as Newcastle's main striker this season, after missing out on the top target, who was, of course, Hugo Ekitike. And the quote that we have from Eddie Howe's interview is, "We really like Hugo, but it wasn't to be. He's decided to go to PSG, and there are no hard feelings towards the lad. We wish him well. We thought he was a real talent and could have done a really good job. They are the teams we are competing against." He also talks about Moussa Diaby, who we've featured on the show over the last couple of weeks. Deal for Moussa Diaby remains too expensive for Newcastle. And Jack Harrison, who of course Newcastle have been linked with as well, is also very difficult because of the likely demands of Leeds. So those old problems which we thought we might see in this transfer window are certainly bearing fruit now, Ben.
Yeah, they are. I mean, first of all, what's clear from that interview is that Newcastle have always been very interested in Moussa Diaby, and I think that that's telling about the ambition of the football club, but the price could well be a problem, and we've always said that. Leverkusen are holding out with add-ons for something around 55 million. The base fee actually wouldn't be too bad. It's not 60 million plus add-ons as I understand it. It's more like 40 to 45 plus add-ons, taking it up to about 55. But as there becomes more interest in the player, there's a danger that you get sucked into a bidding war. So I can understand why Newcastle would walk away from that particular player, even though it's a signing that would excite fans. And then with Harrison, Leeds for me would be very foolish to get rid of him. And what kind of message does that send, even with the incomings at the football club like Luis Sinisterra, who's a wonderful signing? If you've got rid of Calvin Phillips to Manchester City, Rafinha's gone to Barcelona, and then you sell Jack Harrison as well. So Leeds are in a position now where they could hold out for the highest possible price, and they could put Harrison above market value, which again is going to make things very difficult. And I can understand why Eddie Howe, and I think we had this conversation last week, is essentially saying, I'm not going to buy somebody for the sake of it. And this is why the strategy is to look at a younger striker, if at all possible. So when Howe says he might gamble, loosely speaking, on Callum Wilson, that's always been the plan. But the beauty of bringing in somebody like Ekitike is that you've got a young talent for the future that, if he takes quickly to the Premier League, can complement Wilson or potentially even play alongside him. And then if Wilson gets injured, you've got that natural replacement. So there's depth there. But because you're buying young, you aren't saying yet to Wilson that his time as the focal point of Newcastle United's attack is over. And that's the strategy that Newcastle United have always wanted. So unless a box office striker became available at the right price, Wilson's always going to be the focal point. And it is a gamble because of his injury history. And yet you can't blame Howe for wanting to utilise a player that, when he's fit, always scores goals. And Eddie Howe knows really well. And I think Ekitike is hugely exciting because he'll take to PSG very well. And was he to join Newcastle, he's got all the attributes to be a real star. And the reason for that is because he changes direction really quickly. He's tall. He's got a very natural type of finishing where he always seems to be able to spin or turn with his back to goal and find the back of the net. The positions which he goes for goal are very variable, which is an underrated quality. When you look at Jamie Vardy at my club, Leicester, he puts his head down and he often hits it with power. But Ekitike is developing into a more cultured finisher that actually thinks about, in training and in real time, where he wants to put the ball. And he's got that ability to kind of feign power and dink it over a goalkeeper, put it in those top corners with frightening frequency. And this is why I think that PSG see him as one for both now and the future. But like Hal says, when you're up against PSG challenging for a top young player, it shows you that the club are allocating the right targets and are moving in the right direction. Because the bottom of the table, Newcastle United under the previous regime, would not have been wasting their time looking at a player like Ekitike. A Newcastle under new ownership, but still in a mess, would not have been wasting their time looking for someone like Ekitike because they had to be short-termists. So in comes Chris Wood. But now we're seeing under Dan Ashworth and even the previous aspects of the football club under the new ownership, but not under Dan Ashworth, we're seeing what they're thinking and who they want and what kind of attack-minded style they want to try and play. And these young signings, whether it's Ekitike or an equivalent, are really, really important, whether Newcastle get them or not, because it shows you the strategy, and that is to buy young, spend big on talent that the club believe they can invest in the future, and go head-to-head with the big boys all across Europe. And I think when fans see that, whether the club wins or loses on a target like Ekitike, they'll at least have the peace of mind to see that the recruitment strategy is ambitious. And it's that A word, ambition, that is the big, big difference between now and the previous regime.
Definitely is. I mean, Holly, what does that say to you if Newcastle do start the season with just Wilson up top? I mean, we have shown, concern, I guess, on this show over the last 12 months about his injury record. And he had, 2 spells out last season and we did struggle to score goals. But I think what's come from these first couple of friendly games is that Newcastle are, certainly playing in a formation which is trying to bring goals from other quarters, and it's not healthy for any football team, even if you've got the likes of Harry Kane playing up front for you to rely on his goals, because everyone goes through a barren spell. But what's your views on what Craig Hope's had to say there?
That would be a massive worry. I've spoke about it already at the beginning of the podcast, because I feel like we just can't go through another season with one decent striker at the club. And Callum Wilson's excellent. He does score goals. And I think the last few games that he did play towards the end of last season, he was phenomenal. But like you've said, his injury record is there for all to see. He'll probably be out for more games than he'll be fit for. And I'd love him to prove us wrong. But even if his injury record wasn't as prominent as it kind of is, you'd still be worried with one main striker to rely on, because all it takes is him to have an off period where he's not getting those goals. Anything could go wrong, and then we're stuck and we're relying on other positions in the team to make up for those goals. And I just don't feel comfortable with that. I wasn't expecting us to go and spend hundreds of millions in this transfer window. That doesn't bother us at all. If we only brought in one more player, which was a striker, I would be happy. But I just feel like that's such a vital position for us, and we can't go through another season, because I would say probably the last time, apart from Callum Wilson, we had a decent number 9 was Salomon Rondon, who was not even our player, and that was 4 years ago, and he was on loan. It's been a problem for years at Newcastle, and I just think this is something we can't afford to let drag out longer than it's already went on.
Yeah, we're finding it difficult to bring somebody in though, and we are up against it. We don't have European football to offer. Okay, we'll take some of your questions, get them in the chat. Tom Dixon says, Ben, what is the latest on Lucas Paqueta?
Well, Paqueta's price is the issue, and Newcastle have an interest in the player, but they've certainly not advanced it any further than that at this stage. You're looking at something in the region of 65 million to even get Lyon to consider. And the challenge is also the fact that you've got Jean-Michel Aulas, who says there's lots of offers for the player, but you've also got John Textor, the American businessman, who's about to come in as majority owner. And at the moment, Textor has no say, but he wants Lyon to compete with PSG. So Textor, even though he's powerless, is of the belief that Paqueta should stay. And Jean-Michel Aulas is therefore acting on the player's behalf because he knows that Paqueta wants a fresh challenge and will be scapegoated for the sale, or it's all just a tactic because, of course, Aulas can speak now about the player leaving, and then when Textor comes in, there'll be a change of heart at Lyon. So there's sort of an intriguing power battle, and clubs like Newcastle are making their inquiries through the player's agent at the moment to try and work out what's possible and what Paqueta might want. A player who would hugely excite Newcastle fans, and the same can be said for Arsenal. But there's no offer at the moment being prepped. And back in January, of course, when Newcastle did try and advance things, they were actually quoted something a bit closer to 80 million. So the good news is that the price has softened a little bit, but the bad news is that there's a huge amount of interest in Paqueta and there's a lot of politics at Lyon. So it's going to make for a very tricky negotiation. But my understanding is, as of now, Newcastle have not advanced their interest any further. So they're one of many suitors that have inquired about the player, and it's one to watch over the window, but it hasn't been a priority target over the course of the last 7 days since we last spoke. Newcastle haven't done anything more to try and progress this deal.
Okay, Lucas Paqueta, Holly, is that a player that you'd like to see at Newcastle? I know we've had plenty of conversations about it on the show, about him being a friend of Bruno's, but it seems to be becoming more of a genuine potential transfer to Newcastle. Do you think we'd have the upper hand because Bruno and Joe Linton are at the club?
I think it's definitely got to help, and having that Brazilian midfield would be fantastic. It's already working out very well with Joe Linton alongside Bruno. And I know that's a name that's probably been thrown around for quite a while. Not always sure it was because there was some weight in it. I think mostly it was just because of links, obviously, to Bruno. But if it's a real possibility, then of course I'd love to see him come into the side, because I think he's another one of those players that is a progressive player. It's not someone for the here and now to stabilise us in the Premier League. It's someone that can take that next step and we can go and challenge with.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It'll run and run, I'm sure, that one, until he decides what he is going to do. Mr. Midnight says, evening all. Ben, are there any new names in the frame for the striker and right wing spots? Not convinced Harrison is value for money. They think hoping for fresh links if Diaby isn't happening. I mean, there's new links every day. You know, you're talking a couple every day, Ben, aren't you? But I think a lot of it is just simple speculation or stuff coming from agents, which you and I have discussed on this show over the summer.
Yeah, an agent will use Newcastle's name, particularly in the current climate, to try and leverage against a more advanced offer on the table. And we know that when some of these names are being spoken about, there really isn't a great deal of substance as far as Newcastle United are concerned. So the creative players, the wide players, the false nines, the number 10s, anything that falls into that category, I think that there's a few that are realistic. Maxwell Cornet might still be one of them, and Emmanuel Dennis is another. And I think of those two, the latter could take really well to Newcastle United. So that is one to just keep an eye on over the course of the next couple of weeks, because I think that Dennis in particular will leave Watford for somewhere. I know that Everton and West Ham are interested as well. And then Broja is the other name still in the mix as well. West Ham made a offer for a permanent deal, albeit only verbally, and it was intimated to them that Thomas Tuchel is still assessing during pre-season, and then they inquired about a possible loan if a permanent deal isn't possible. And I think from Newcastle's point of view, if a loan is available, that might be something that they come in for as well, because it just provides a little bit less risk. The annoyance is that Newcastle are trying to build something that catches up with the Premier League's big six. And if you loan and he does well and then goes back to Chelsea, you're back to square one. And that's why obviously clubs, when they see a player of Broja's quality for around about 30 million, would prefer to pay the 30 million than loan him and know that he's in all probability going to go back to Chelsea Football Club if he does very well. And then another name to look out for that sort of fills into the Ekitike mode and is at PSG is Arnold Kalimwendo, who could be made available, and Leeds United are the most advanced, but Newcastle have inquired as well. And he's a player with a lot of good attributes that could well, because he's on their pre-season tour of Japan at the moment, be part of Gaultier's plans at PSG. And the new PSG manager has actually said that he's been very impressed by the player so far. So that's bad news from Newcastle and Leeds' perspective, but 20 to 25 million might just do it. A lot's going to depend on Icardi and whether he goes, because that might allow the youngster at PSG to come into the side still. And he has featured so far relatively heavily in pre-season, but that's another name just to look out for. And then the final striker name, if we're sort of talking about real substance, because I don't think, for example, like a Jesse Lingard to Newcastle, unlike in January, is something that's going to happen in the summer. I don't think Newcastle have even revisited it, even though they were quite close in January. So I struggle to believe that there's too much substance this summer to that kind of move. But it wouldn't at all surprise me if Newcastle ramp up their efforts for Ivan Toney. And I think, again, it might be that Kalimwendo, if he leaves, goes to Leeds, and then Newcastle have a clearer path to somebody like Toney. But these are all just ifs and buts. But Leeds are definitely looking at Toney, and I'm hearing kind of rumblings that Newcastle are doing the same. And even in January, he was a player that was firmly on Newcastle United's radar. And that type of player who is only 26 and is arguably Brentford's best or most valuable player financially speaking, that sort of mould, I think, would be really good. He had a pretty productive season with Brentford in the Premier League. He got 12 goals, 5 assists as well, and of course kept Brentford up. So it remains to be seen whether Brentford are going to play hardball on this one. They've obviously already lost the creativity and the assists in particular of Christian Eriksen. But Toney to Newcastle, for me, of all of the links, feels like it might be gettable. He would be a reasonable price, and it would make a lot of sense. So that's my kind of like dark horse bet, if you like. No offer's been placed at this stage, but for quite some time now, since the window's opened, he's been a name that's been linked with Newcastle. He's been on a kind of broad shortlist without them advancing too much. And he was a name that was there before Chris Wood came in as somebody that Newcastle were even looking to see if he was available in January. So who knows? If they don't find the striker solution and they don't get the strategy of a slightly younger name, they might turn to a mid-20s like Toney a little bit later in the window just to bring in some reinforcement.
Holly, I always say never go back. Ivan Toney, it doesn't float my boat.
No, not at all. I'm the same as you. Don't want to bring ex-players back to the club. I think we've had this talk all of the time, especially under Ashley, when players have left the club and done well wherever they've went to, and they're saying, oh, bring them back. Just don't, even if they are doing well. But of course, there'll be the odd exception here and there. But for me, I think that ship sailed. We need to move on. And I think we can aim higher than the likes of Ivan Toney, and no disrespect to him when I say that.
No, I mean, he's had a decent couple of seasons at Brentford. He didn't look great at, in the season that we've just had, but he scored, he can score goals, but I just think going back, it's not really for me. But it might just be a case of who we can get now. And one of the questions that somebody's just asked in the chat, Ben, is it's segueing into where I wanted to go anyway, about our new CEO from Atlanta. Joseph Martinez is the name that somebody's mentioned. John Norton there said, how about Joseph Martinez from Atlanta? New CEO could help a deal and possibly PIF. as well. And somebody did ask, so we'll do this double barrel. Do you have any insight on our new CEO, Eels?
Yeah, good questions for sure. So Joseph Martinez is the player that has been mentioned. The challenge with him is he's 29, and it's a big step up, with all due respect, from Atlanta United, where he has scored a ton of goals, but particularly in 2019, I would say, and before that, whereas the output has faded a little bit since then. So this year, just 5 goals, and last year, 12 in 24, comparative to, I think it was 27 in 29 and 31 and 34 in the league. So he maybe is not of the right age or disposition to move to Newcastle as anything other than a squad player. And even though very well liked at Atlanta United, I'm not entirely sure that that would be the right fit from Newcastle's perspective. And then I was actually just going to say with Tony as well, I suppose it's just a case of, is it really coming back? Because I think he only played a couple of times in the Premier League for the football club. So it would feel a bit like a fresh signing, but I certainly take the point. And then with Darren Eales, just a brilliant appointment, in my opinion. It's been no secret that Newcastle were looking to appoint a CEO to oversee the day-to-day running of the football club in a more structured manner. And he's originally from Essex, and then he went over to the United States after leaving school to pursue his career in football on a scholarship, I believe. He got a light blue as well, no less, at Cambridge University. So I shouldn't like him because I, of course, am a dark blue myself. And he's also been legal counsel at West Brom before. So he's got a lot of experience, ex-Tottenham Hotspur as well. And there's a few kind of tenets to how he works. So at Atlanta United, he's really developed a people culture. That's the first thing to say. And that plays into this new, ambitious, transparent Newcastle United that wants to integrate all aspects of the football club. And he'll be very good at that. Fan engagement is another area where he really excelled in Atlanta, from renovating the digital output to improving the food, to lowering the ticket prices, to helping structure the slightly more difficult task in the MLS of traveling away from home for fans. And it created a really tight-knit, vocal, passionate fan base that are one of, if not the best in MLS. I think them and Seattle are certainly my favorite two in terms of the fan culture. And he spent a lot of time and energy in Atlanta meeting fan groups and engaging directly, being seen in person, and making sure that the connection was never broken between the football club and the fan base. So that's another really good aspect as well. And then I know that he's really keen to work with Amanda Staveley to further integrate the women's team into the football club, and then all of the other peripherals around improving things like the stadium and the training facilities and so on. So what you get is a very open, very approachable, very ambitious CEO who, due to his legal background, won't kind of be afraid, I suppose, to take a swing at the big six and shake things up and make sure that Newcastle United's opinion is heard. And yet there's like a soft touch to him as well. And he's very intent on getting to know his players and his manager. So he'll obviously, as CEO, be staying away from any of the day-to-day football decisions. But what he wants to do is develop personal and professional relationships with individuals so he can better understand how the football club can tick and build a model from a business perspective around that is sustainable and has longevity. So I think we're going to hear a lot of buzzwords under him, like fan engagement, like digital transformation, like modernization. And he, especially working with PIF, where they'll have different perhaps agendas and end goals, will be more intent as CEO on keeping the connection local and with the fan base in and around Newcastle and the community, whilst PIF grow the brand. And their operational control that he brings, I think, is going to be very liked by the fan base, because they are going to understand more how he ticks and operates comparative to previous CEOs. So I think it's a really strong appointment. It's a really ambitious appointment. And there's lots to like about what he did at Atlanta and before, in fact, that can be translated back to Newcastle United Football Club.
We don't want to let Chris Leeson's daughter down. So here you are. There's Ben and Holly's little kingdom.
Oh, wow. That ears are bigger than that in real life, though, unfortunately.
I noticed he's got Leicester's colours on, though, but he says, I told my daughter we were watching Ben and Holly tonight. She wasn't expecting this. So there we go. Okay, big shout out, as always, to our sponsors. And first of all, it is Spider VPN. And the guys have been with us since the very start. So big shout out to Spider Miner. Worldwide coverage, the only cryptocurrency miner that can mine 5 different cryptocurrencies at the same time while it's using virtually no energy, and it's VPN protected. Buy yours now at www.miner.spidervpn.org. Thanks to Skips and Bins. Telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com. Website www.skipsandbins.com. Easy contract free and pay as you go waste collection. Thanks to L&G Family Funeral Directors 01913897245. and Garden of Healing Dispensary, CBD hemp and cannabinoid specialists, www.theguhd.com. Thanks to Mr. Vicky's, handmade in Cumbria. You can find them at mrvickies.co.uk or by dialing 01768 210 102. Thanks also to Away Day Clothing. Their website will be announced next week. And to qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, Newcastle, and the guys who run our website, NUFCmatters.com. Thanks to Media Arts for all the help with the video side of things. And if you want to subscribe, hit the Newcastle Legends logo in the bottom right-hand corner, and you can subscribe for free. We still do 7 shows a week. Hit the thumb up to like the video, click share to your social media, and drop into the comments box to speak to like-minded Newcastle fans. You can also listen to us as a podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and the rest. It usually goes up 24 hours after the YouTube show has finished. If you want to become a member, click join underneath the YouTube video that you are watching now. Or you can go to the website, NUFCmatters.com, and click membership and spend a little bit more money and get a cup, a pen, a membership card, and a scarf, and entry into the monthly draw. There's a QR code as well if you've got a smartphone, which will take you straight there. If you're a subscriber, then we will send you a free car sticker. You just need to email john@nufcmatters.com to claim it. And we also support the food bank on this channel. NUFC fans, foodbank.co.uk is where you can make a virtual donation 365 days of the year using the match day bucket. We've also got this t-shirt currently up for grabs on my Twitter profile at Steve Wraith. That is pinned to the top. You just need to make a bid underneath, and we will announce the winner of that on the Three Amigos on Friday. The Alan Shearer Ball is still ongoing. It is $2.99 a ticket, limited to 99 tickets. Enter now at NUFCmatters.com. And don't forget, John Gibson will have an evening with Frank Clark, and that will be Monday the 5th of December, and it will be at the Tynemouth Surf Cafe. You need to get online quickly for those because it is limited to 35 tickets. NUFC Matters Score Predictor, the Super 6 is live now. Join the Matters gang, enter into our own league, £10 per entry for the season. Cash prize winner every month, an exclusive Manager of the Month t-shirt. Cash prize for overall season winner, Trophy and Manager of the Year t-shirt. Sign up now, NUFCmatters.com. And don't forget Peter Beardsley Soccer School as well. Monday night training and July-August summer camp. Bookings being taken now. The Peter Beardsley Soccerschool.com is where you find all the information for that. And I have posted something in the chat. We are up for Podcast of the Year, so please click the link in the chat and vote for NUFC Matters. You just need to search, vote for it, and then just confirm it by email. But thank you very much for the nomination, and get yourself on there now tonight and give us a vote. Thanks very much. Okay, back to the chat. Hi, Ben. For me, it's too early for big signings, says Sean. I'd be happy with Harrison and Zapata. We need competition in these positions. How likely are these two?
Yeah, I mean, we've already spoken about Harrison. I think it's going to be a big challenge to get Leeds United to sell. There's plenty of interest even outside the Premier League as well. So I don't see that one happening. And I think that Leeds themselves are just desperate for creativity and still goals. And they've really, a bit like Newcastle, only got up front Patrick Bamford, who also is a little bit injury prone. So I'm not really convinced that Newcastle can get somebody like Harrison. And then with Duvan Zapata, it's like one of those names that keeps being linked kind of over and over again. And Napoli are sort of, well, Atlanta now, but Napoli, when he was there, were always of the belief that the player didn't want to make a Premier League move. And when he was there, they were getting offers. So this would have probably been back in 2017, 2018. I remember speaking to some sources at Napoli recently around Koulibaly and asking about the player. And it was just sort of shot down that he ever wanted to move away to a Premier League club just for sort of personal reasons. So I'm not entirely sure that that's going to be possible. And I think that he's pretty settled now at Atalanta. I presume, by the way, that's the Zapata you mean, rather than Christian Zapata, who's in his mid-30s at San Lorenzo. But I don't think any of them really fit into Eddie Howe's strategy either. That's the main thing, that a bit like before when we were discussing Atlanta United, Newcastle are looking for players that are kind of 25, 26 or under. And if they were to come in for a big signing, it would be a marquee name. And I don't think there's any substance or links to the long odds of the Neymars or the Ronaldos of this world. But if they break their strategy for somebody who's 29, 30, 31, they would have to be a box office name. I think Howe is happy with the spine that he's got. And if you look at who Newcastle are trying to add to that spine now, it is the Ekitikes of this world. It is the Diabys of this world. It's not 29, 30, 31-year-olds, whatever their reputation is. So I don't think either of those two are possible. Obviously, in the case of Harrison specifically, he fits the mold, unlike Zapata, but doesn't fit the price. And I just would be so surprised, having lost Rafinha and lost the kind of anchor in their midfield that is Calvin Phillips, if Leeds give up another 8 Premier League goals through letting Harrison go anywhere. 8 goals compared obviously to last season, with the anticipation that he would repeat that feat, because I think it's back-to-back seasons actually where Harrison got 8 goals in the Premier League. So I don't see the player leaving. The price tag for Harrison is out there at about 35 million, but I think you'll find that Leeds want closer to 40 million plus add-ons. And even then, you still might find that Jesse Marsch puts his foot down and says no.
Yeah, it seems like he's done that already today. Holly, thoughts on ASM? Tel Ross says he believes that he may go as part of a deal with a new signing. I've got to be honest, it was the same old ASM against 1860, rolling around on the ground. You know, obviously he's targeted. We know he is because of the effect that he can have on a game. But those last 2 games against Arsenal and Burnley, we saw flashes of what could be. I just felt against 1860, it was back to the old lying on the ground, hands in the air, rolling over. Just does my head in. It really does. I wouldn't be sad to see him go as long as the money was spent to bring, an adequate replacement in. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on ESM.
I'm of the belief that he'll probably stay at the club, but would I be opposed to seeing him leave? No, I wouldn't. He did probably save us for, if not 1 season, probably 2 seasons, just from his kind of ability to get us in a game in general. And I think even when he came off the bench, he could always just change up a game and get us much more involved. But I think after his first 1 or 2 seasons in the Premier League, a lot of opposition started to suss out his game plan and he became less effective. We've seen him obviously wearing a lot of bandages and stuff like that for no apparent reason. It seems like he's doing a lot of this to get the fans off of his back, because I think there's been a massive decline in his performances, but he doesn't show that kind of motivation to improve and get back on track for me. And I think he's quite self-centered, in my opinion, in the way that he plays. I don't think he always does what's necessary for the team, and he just kind of wants to make a spectacle of himself by doing unnecessary skill and stuff, especially in and around the box, and often wastes goal scoring opportunities. Not to mention he loses pretty much every 50-50 challenge that he's in, and I can't see him having much of a future in this Newcastle side. I think it's the wrong time for him as well. And I think he's found it very difficult with the likes of Bruno coming into the side to step up and become the star man that he once was. So I wouldn't be opposed to letting him go at all, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was still here.
Yeah, it's a funny situation. It really is. Mind if Spurs are that interested, and we could potentially use him as collateral and bring Harry Kane the other way, or Son. I'd take either one at the minute. Going into the new season, Ben, we've got a load of these little questions, so I'm gonna fire through these ones just so you can give your views on them. David Blythe says, any possible interest in Trossard?
Trossard, I think, by the way, would be a really good signing for Newcastle. It'll be interesting to see what the agreement is, if you like, as far as Dan Ashworth and who he can and can't come in for and when. And I think that although you can't block a new director of football who's served out his gardening leave from raiding Brighton in a legal sense, perhaps there is some kind of agreement there that will stop Newcastle from swooping. I think Trossard, by the way, is actually pretty happy at Brighton at the moment. He likes living down there. He likes teammates. He likes his role in the team as well. So it would make a lot of sense. There's been no inquiry to my knowledge. And again, from Brighton's point of view, they've got a player that played virtually every Premier League game last season and scored 8 times. So they're going to want to hang on to him. And he's 27 as well. Not that that's an old age, but I think Newcastle will look at other targets first.
Okay, Sekou Mara, says Steve.
Really good player. This one does sort of fit into Newcastle's strategy, I suppose, similar to Ekitike. And he maybe just has this kind of long-term aspect going against him as far as Newcastle are concerned, because unlike Ekitike, I'm not sure that he could be thrown straight into Premier League football. The feeling is that he's been on Newcastle's list and that they're looking at him. They haven't done anything with that yet. They've not prepared a bid or anything, but he's a top player. He was at the youth system at PSG, and he was a France youth international before he was signed by Bordeaux in 2017 on a free transfer. And he's flourished. He's contributed to 11 goals in about 35 or 36 senior outings. And the only kind of challenge from a club like Newcastle's perspective is that it might be a step too soon for him. So he's quite a humble player. Ekitike off the field is, but on it, he's got quite a swagger behind his belief, which can be very good. Whereas with this particular case, the player, Sekou Mara, is just a little bit more sensible in how he thinks about his next step. And ideally, I think that for him, it is first team football he is looking for still week in, week out for another season or two. And there's definitely some interest coming in from Lyon and from Monaco as well. So Newcastle could well make their move and see him as the long term. But I think if you compare him to Ekitike in terms of how developed he is for a young player, Ekitike could have come right into the Premier League and done a job in some capacity as a squad player, whereas I think Sekou Mara maybe still needs another season or two. That's not to say that Newcastle wouldn't come in because you want to buy the young players now and then have them in your control, and then you still have the opportunity to loan out or loan back. But were he to join, probably for a fee of 15 million or so, the pluses are that Newcastle would get a very all-round kind of finisher who's a fast learner. But the downside would be that fans and Eddie Howe would have to be quite patient with him in the short term.
Okay, Geordie in Lowestoft, hope you're doing well, mate. He says, evening from Lowestoft. Just think this time last year we were in London trying to help NUFC fight for the takeover. A year on, we are linked with every player going. Exciting times. And Holly, I did see your post on Twitter, I think it was earlier today or yesterday, about that trip down to London where you stood outside Downing Street, you handed the letter in, and then you gave an impromptu speech to the media. I mean, it seems like a different lifetime, Holly.
Yeah, definitely. I can't believe it's only been a year. It seems like much longer than a year, but it was worth it in the end. I'm going to be honest, I wasn't expecting to get the result that I think we wanted, but I just wanted to make sure I felt as though I'd done as much as I possibly could as a fan. And I think that we're sitting here now a year later and the owners have been here quite a while, got a brilliant manager, and the squad is progressing very well. It's an exciting time to be a Newcastle fan, and I just can't wait for the future.
Yeah, me too. Dan Brown, good evening. He says, Ben, do you think the season would be an ideal time to utilise the youth players such as Stevenson and Dwenny and Westernoff as they may prove credible options, whilst also saving us some money? It's an interesting one, that, because I watched Elliot Anderson with a keen eye on in the game against 1860. I didn't think he looked out of place, Ben, and sometimes you don't need to go and spend a lot of money because the best player could be sitting in your dressing room already.
Yeah, and I mean, if you don't give young players that do everything they can to show their potential, then there's no pathway, at which point every young player feels that they're not going to end up in the first team. And one of the challenges is that if you inherit the old regime and the old academy and try and jump a level or two up, then there will be a tendency to buy the finished product. And Newcastle need to make sure that the takeover doesn't impact on the existing pathways in place for young talent. But that said, Howe needs depth at this point if Newcastle United are to continue to progress. And it's all very well saying Elliot Anderson, but he was playing at Bristol Rovers, who, with respect, are nowhere near the Premier League standard. So in a player like him, you have potential, but I think that loaning back out is the next stage. And when you look at the caliber of clubs interested in Elliot Anderson, you've still got Bristol Rovers, you've got Sheffield Wednesday, there's interest around the kind of top end of League One and Championship. And that tells you the level that those clubs think he's at in terms of playing week in, week out. So then to throw him into the Premier League, even as a squad player, is a big ask. And I think that Eddie Howe would be taking a gamble, to be honest. Of course, the fan base sees this young talent and wants to see them succeed. But the truth is, pre-season is not a gauge of too much. It's a chance for the younger talent to play with the senior players and show what they can do. Absolutely, there's no denying that. But more importantly, it's the training sessions and the behind closed doors work that's put in, when Eddie Howe can actually watch closely, work directly, and then make a decision on where the future lies, which is exactly what, say, Thomas Tuchel is doing with Broja at Chelsea and Levi Colwell as well. So I don't think any of them are ready just yet. And again, if you were saying Newcastle United are where they were a year ago, but under this ownership, and the expectation for the season is to survive relegation, then a hungry young academy player that can come in and add depth, come off the bench, replace somebody that's injured, you'd say yes. But it's the fact that if everything goes according to plan, then Newcastle are going to hope to start the season with the same momentum that they ended January onwards from last season. Then if you find yourself challenging for European football, that's where you really need more proven players. So perversely, I think bar the odd standout one that's just indisputably first team at Newcastle United, it's actually the pathways from academy to first team that might be impacted over the next few seasons by a spending spree where, out of necessity, if Newcastle move quicker than they expect and get European football early, then they'll use that money that comes with it to buy more finished products. Now, some of them will be young finished products that then still have pathways to the first team. But in all of this, what I'm interested about at youth level is how Newcastle are going to evolve and change and develop their academy model to match the level of ambition of where the first team is heading.
Question for you there, Holly. Do you think there's any value in going for a proven but older striker with zero sell-on value? I mean, we've spoken about Ivan Toney, who's still relatively young, but we have been linked with some senior centre forwards. I mean, is there a risk, that we do that and then we end up stuck with somebody like, him and Wood and Wilson, and potentially all three could end up crocked? But what's your views on potentially going for a more experienced striker?
I think it makes a lot of sense, especially if you get them on a short-term contract. Anything between 1 and 3 years, I think, should be fine if there's a player in their late 20s, early 30s. And if they can score the goals in the league, then 100% get them. If we're in a position where we're struggling to get a striker, then ultimately you can't be fussy. But also, we need to guarantee safety for next season. And I know that's going to sound silly to some people because we finished the second half of the season strong, etc. But there's still will always be a risk there until we're scoring the goals and we have a level of stability there. And you want to just kind of sit in mid-table, but not wait till the very last few games before we get to that stage. You want to be in and around those positions from the offset. And I think we need a striker to do that. So if there's someone there that can do that, they've proven that they can do it, then 100% I'll get them into the club.
Okay, BJT says Amanda Staveley's confirmed that the club's wage to turnover ratio is around 65%. However, how do we reduce this if we're continually buying players, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, 65 is not a terrible number, but it's higher than, I think, the previous year and certainly 2 years ago when Newcastle were more in the 50s. A terrible number is Everton at 85. An incredible number is Tottenham at sort of under 40%. So, when Newcastle look to lower that number, it's only really by 5%, and they'll be somewhere quite close to the Premier League average, which if they're Premier League average for that ratio and percentage, but a top 4, top 6 club, then they'll be doing very well. And that's where Spurs have got the skill of being bottom of the Premier League in that percentage, but in top 4 based on last season, because they're stringent with how they pay their players. So Newcastle can do a number of things. They can obviously look for more outgoings and bring in transfer fees, but you've only got 2 windows to do that. They can stick to their wage structure and make sure that marquee signings don't come with marquee wages so distant from other players in the squad and much higher that it causes unrest, both financially speaking and in terms of the culture of the football club. They can do structured deals that are more incentive-led, so they can say to their footballers, you stay within this base wage bracket, so everyone feels like they're doing a similar job for a similar-ish wage, but then depending on what you do, either as an individual or a team, the wages go up and down. And I'm sure that will be the case with Newcastle, that if they qualify for European football, there'll be some kind of wage increase. But there might be the flip side over time, where if they regularly qualify for European football, the wages go down if they don't. And that's what we've seen at Manchester United. And that's caused some of the unrest around Ronaldo, where the players didn't make Champions League and the wages went down by 25%. And then the other really interesting way of doing it, which is a bit more innovative, is you start having sliding scale of wages. So contracts can have 2 years with an option to extend, or you can renew somebody's deal and then the wages can be staggered. And we're going to see this, for example, with Lewandowski at Barcelona, where it's a 4-year contract, 3 years plus an option to extend by a year. First 2 years, there's then a bailout on Barcelona's side, because obviously he'll be well into his mid-30s at that point. The third year, if he stays, the wage will go down. And then the option to extend year, the wage will go down as well. So it's almost saying to a player, you're coming at your peak and we're paying you X. But then either depending on what happens, or depending on your age, or depending on how the team does, it could either go up or down accordingly. And having that sliding scale gives the club the flexibility. Because what teams have done in the past is they've gambled and they've said, right, we want Champions League football and we're bringing in you, let's say Chelsea, just for the hell of it, Raheem Sterling, 310k a week. And then there's no if or but around that number. There's no, if we win the Premier League, it goes up. But if we get relegated, it goes down. And I know those are 2 very extreme scenarios, but clubs are realizing that players will often agree when they back themselves and the team that they're joining to taking a bit less up front. And then if everything goes well and according to plan, you earn an amazing amount of money, more than you asked for. And the club can offset that, because if you get that money, they've got the money coming in from the European football they were hoping for. And again, vice versa. If the club finishes in the bottom half below their budgetary targets, then the wages go down. So that sliding scale is another way of doing it. Now, not every player is comfortable with that, and not every football club do it. And Newcastle United, to my knowledge at the moment, have not got that kind of sliding scale in place. But what they can do is just be firm on making sure that they're not overpaying on wages, which is one of the reasons ultimately, along with the agent demands, why they didn't in the end go for a player like Ekitike. So it's a balance, because there's not that many players at Newcastle United that they can just click their fingers and sell to get in big amounts of incoming finances. ASM might be one name if they choose to get rid of him, but what they can do is just keep a sensible wage structure. And like I said right at the beginning, the other thing to bear in mind is just that the actual percentage isn't too bad at the moment anyway, but what it is about 10% higher than Newcastle United would like it to be.
Congratulations to Australian Cameron Smith, who has come through a thrilling final round tussle with Rory McIlroy and Cameron Young to claim his first title with a dramatic one-shot victory in the 150th Open. Fantastic game, fantastic tournament, and congratulations to him. Always good to see the game go to the final hole. It's always good, that. Fantastic. Derek Sharp makes an interesting point, Ollie. Says the fans need to realise we need to walk before we can run. Under Ashley, we were crawling. Stepping stone players is the first step. How right he is.
Definitely. I feel like that's the sort of thing that I've alluded to throughout the podcast. Just about kind of keeping a lid on expectation. It's very exciting. We had an incredible end of the season, and we've brought in some good players. You look at the likes of Botman, which I just think is a fantastic signing for the club. But you still need to be realistic, and it's going to be a long time before we are challenging at the highest level. And I think the most important thing now is just stability. We need a year or a couple of years where we're not in the relegation zone at any point. We're constantly sitting in the mid-table positions before we even think about challenging, for me. And he's 100% right. We were crawling under Ashley, and it needs to be a gradual process. We can't be expecting success and, competition overnight. It's just not realistic.
Yeah, and I've got to be honest, that's the way I feel. You've got to have a sense of reality. Mine comes from age and experience, being not just a Newcastle fan, a football fan. Holly's at the opposite end of the scale with regards to experience and time at Newcastle. All she's experienced, of course, is the Mike Ashley era. I've had the joyous occasion of John Hall and Keegan and all of that. I had the wonderful years of Keegan, Waddle, Beardsley as players, and I've been on that roller coaster ride with Newcastle. So for me, as a football supporter, the experience of the highs and lows is there. And for me, I'm just looking forward to what's going to happen. I'd love to think that we might see Newcastle develop and build. And I think Mir Dad described it this week as we're building a skyscraper. And I thought that was great. He's used the words patience. He's using different metaphors to describe what they are doing. But I think the one I've described, Ben, is Newcastle are building this on firm foundations. They're not building it on sand.
I mean, they're literally building it from Saudi sand, I suppose. But the analogy is right. And having a foundational approach and a strategy, even though it doesn't excite fans as much as just new signings, and of course, winning on the football field is the way to go. And I think that the recruitment is part of that strategy. So the way that the Rubins and Staveley have handled the football club since they've come in, the appointment of Howe, even if he wasn't the first choice, and Dan Ashworth, are very shrewd, and now an extremely forward-thinking and ambitious CEO has come in. So the nuts and bolts of the operational side of the day-to-day running of the football club are there now, and that gives everybody peace of mind. And if they continue to be transparent and fuel this connection between the fan base and the football club, then Newcastle United are going to be in a really strong position. Of course, there's still some question marks over what the plan is for the brand and where PIF fit in. And as transparent as everyone else has been, PIF have still not spoken to the media or engaged directly with the fan base, in stark contrast to, say, Todd Bowley at Chelsea, who was talking to supporter groups long before he came in. And I know that Amanda Staveley and others do speak on behalf of PIF. But I think that Yasser Al-Rumayyan ideally will outline how the football club in the next 5 to 8 years fits in to Vision 2030 and beyond. And then Newcastle fans will start to understand about the growth of the brand and where the commercial opportunities are coming from. Are they exclusively looking in the MENA region? When is the shirt sponsor going to change? Could the stadium be renamed? How do Newcastle see themselves in terms of spending power? Is it a 3-year roadmap, a 5-year roadmap, a 10-year roadmap to get into Champions League football? These are the answers we still don't know. And in fairness, the strategy doesn't have to be tell Ben Jacobs and the rest of the media. The strategy can be, we've got a strategy and we don't want to share it in public. So watch that strategy happen and see us succeed. And it is clear that there's a plan on the football side, but the brand side is a little bit less defined at this stage. And the brand and football side are going to go hand in hand, because it's the brand that, as it grows, comparative, especially to slightly more established global brands like your Liverpools and your Manchester Uniteds, the brand growth has so much financial, commercial potential that that's what can feed back into the football club. And I think that Newcastle fans are excited about their team at the moment because they've got it back. They're excited about players like Bruno, Kieran Trippier, and so on. But as things stabilise, at some point, they are also going to want to know what is PIF's day-to-day or week-on-week or month-on-month role? Who's selecting these sponsors? What's the filter process like? What areas are they going into? And when we get it, how much goes back into hypothetical or formative redevelopment plans? How much goes into player signings? Is St James's Park going to be expanded because of the big demand? At what point is direct tie-ups between Saudi Arabia and Newcastle going to happen, and which way around? Is Saudi Arabia going to come to Newcastle in some respect, or is Newcastle going to go to Saudi Arabia? And I don't mean that in terms of the team. I mean, would there be a soccer school in Saudi Arabia? Will there be sports science centres that Newcastle utilise so they can have cutting-edge medicine, a bit like Leeds United do at Qatar's Aspire Academy? Or are we going to see aspects of Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 come into Newcastle and its community? And what does that look like, and who's overseeing it? So I hope that within the strategy, we learn a bit more. But I think that for now, the most important thing to a Newcastle United fan is just that they've got an ownership group that cares and have ambition. And when you care and have ambition, whether you share that ambition or not, and whether you spend massively or don't, what you get is everyone pulling in the right direction. And when Newcastle pull in the right direction, as we saw particularly at home last season, they're very, very difficult to stop. And if you have that fortress St James's Park, that incredible fan base, that ownership group that truly cares, then whether PIF are there or not, you're going to have much more success than under Mike Ashley. And I think that's the starting point. And then to get from much more success, which is maybe mid-table, to incredible success, which is European football and beyond, that's the push that comes from PIF, their financing, their strategy, their brand growth. And that's the aspect that over time anyway, I just hope we learn a little bit more about. But it's clearly exciting times for Newcastle, and I wish the club a great season.
Like everything, I think they'll do it in their own time. I think you're right, Ben. It's the one thing that you've been consistent with on here. You know, you say there needs to be transparency. You want to hear from them. I'm sure it will happen in due course. That's the hour up. Great to have Holly back on the show. Ben, great to see you're on the mend as well. I presume you're feeling a bit better this week.
Yeah, I am. Just to reiterate as well, great to see Holly back. I think that anyone that does these podcasts has the opportunity to be a little bit more visual and add context behind what often gets said on a more toxic Twitter. And I think that Holly does a great job in verbalizing her opinions, in presenting, in being a pundit, in engaging with the fan bases on Twitter and on these shows. And everybody comes on them or doesn't come on them for different reasons. But I think from the outside in, and as a non-Newcastle fan, all I would say to Holly and anybody else, by the way, who's young and interested in this kind of area is give yourself a voice. Never be afraid to stick to your opinions and enjoy it. And then when you get off the podcast or get off Twitter, the person that disagrees with you, as long as they're respectful, then that's part and parcel of a good, healthy football debate. And if they're not, don't even care about them, because if you enjoy it, then your opinion is always valid and you're always kind of welcome on these kind of things. And yeah, then from my point of view, I've just about got the voice back, and I'm drinking Lucozade to have enough energy not to fall asleep. But I promise you, it's not you putting me to sleep.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Ollie.
Ben.
Cheers.
Great stuff. I look forward to speaking to you both next week. Take care. Have a great week.